Welcome to the Keep It Or CHANGECARS podcast, proudly brought to you by Change Cars, South Africa's most trusted online car buying platform. This is the second episode of the podcast, and we've got a very special person in studio. We are talking all matters vehicle financing. We've got Deen Govender, who's head of dealer relations in Gauteng for Absa. Now, Deen, Change Cars views Absa as the best financial institution for car financing. That's us, standard. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for coming through. We've also got Michael Pursuit, owner of Change Cars. Michael, are you well?
Always good. Lovely to be here. Super happy to interview Deen, answer some questions.
Yeah.
But most importantly, I'm here to learn. I love, every time I get a question, the thing I take the most out of it is I learn. I promise you. I look at a question sometimes, I think, I don't know the answer. That's why we've got the expert.
That's why we've got the expert. We're going to learn a lot today. Deen, thank you so much. So the first question is from Rajan. He's from Belito. Now, Rajan is looking to buy a brand new vehicle in the 350,000 Rand mark and ideally doesn't want to put down a deposit for that car. He indicates that he could afford a vehicle up to 545,000 based on Prime Plus 2 on his current salary, but he doesn't want to be squeezed. He doesn't want to stretch it that far. So his question is, he wants to know if he should ideally finance the vehicle over 72 months with no residual or 60 months and take a small 15% residual. Deen, you are the expert here. What would you say?
Yeah, thank you. This is a good question from Rajan. So I think the first thing, listening to Rajan's question is, he's not looking to overstretch himself.
Not
he
at all.
qualifies for 545,000,
Correct.
but he's saying, okay, let me go lower. So I think the simple
Is that the smart way to go,
That's
by
the
the way?
smart way to go because, I mean, if you look at the current economy that we're currently in, an upward interest rate cycle, we're seeing interest rates tick up every quarter. We're probably in for another interest rate hike this month. So have a buffer, have options because we find that a lot of customers are very, very borderline. And as soon as the interest rate ticks up, they find themselves in financial difficulty. So Rajan, good choice, right? I support that thinking.
Is it fair to say what his outlook is rare? Most people say, I can afford
for maximum.
545. I'm going for max. We'll deal with the challenges later. This is rare. He's coming in close on 200,000 less than he can afford. That's around 4,500 Rand, which is huge.
No, so as I said, perfect approach to managing his finances.
Of course.
I suppose, from a banking perspective, my initial thoughts would be to say, definitely no residual, right? But I think you mentioned that Rajan had two options. 72 months or 60 months, but definitely no deposit. So if he went over 72 months, he would have to, obviously he said he's not putting down a deposit, he would actually pay a higher interest over the period, right? So 72 months.
So if you got 72 months, he pays a high interest rate.
Yeah, over the period of the term because we're calculating it on the capital outstanding.
Yes.
But if he went for 60 months with a 15% residual, his installment's going to be higher. He's going to bring down that capital amount much quicker. Over the period of the loan, he would pay less interest, though there's a catch. He's going to be left with the residual value at the end of term. What does he do? He could either, if he has cash, he could settle that at the end of the term, but you've got to have cash available. Alternatively, there is an option to refinance through another vehicle and asset finance.
So Deen, let's talk about residual. Those who don't understand, what is that and how does that affect you as a buyer?
So basically, with a residual, commonly also called a balloon.
Balloon
right?
payment,
A balloon payment. So if people want to reduce their installments, they take a residual value and banks could potentially go up to residuals of up to, let's say 40%. Depending on the model of the vehicle. Newer models, higher residuals or balloons. Older models, lower residuals or balloons, right? So what you do is, if people want to reduce their installment, they add a balloon to the payment. And what we do as a bank, we actually charge you interest on the residual value, and the capital remains at the end, right? So that's why I say there's the catch.
There's a catch.
Because at the end, what do? Do I have money to settle? Do I refinance? Do I take out a personal loan, unsecured lending at a higher interest rate and end up paying more, right? The other thing to consider is, depending on the term, 72 months for Rajan or 60 months if you have to go with a balloon, that car depreciates.
Yeah.
what's it going to be worth after 60 or 72 months? Something very, very important to consider. But it also depends on the make and model that you buy. Some of them depreciate quicker.
Well, Rajan indicated to us that he always keeps a car for the finance term.
Yeah.
What I must say, I find most people say that, but they don't want to keep a car for 5 or 6 years. Myself, I've always been anti-residual, but I said to you, I have learned something today. My advice to Rajan, definitely go 72 months. If he can pay extra, pay in extra. Do the banks frown upon? And again, this is a very fair question. Do banks frown upon extra being paid in, or is it welcomed, reducing their risk at all times? What is the feeling there, Deen?
So no, definitely not frowned upon. I mean, people don't realize how open banks are to communicating with their customers. People should call in, they should ask questions, understand their options. So if Rajan came across a lump sum,
A bonus,
or perhaps an inheritance, who knows? And he decided to put it into the deal. He could ask the bank to restructure that deal, either reduce the payments over a period, or reduce the capital. So what happens then? He'd pay less interest over the term. He could pay this loan off much quicker. So I mean, any time and any customer that asks, I would always advise, if you have questions, speak to your bank.
Talk to the bank.
Talk to us, please. We love it. We want to help customers. And especially, as I said earlier, in these difficult times, talk to us more. We geared up for conversation. We really want to help you be financially free, viable, and not find yourself in any sort of financial difficulty.
It's completely in the bank's interest to have, number one, a happy customer, obviously, but a customer that's not under stress or under duress. It's just completely in your interest.
People realize that. Hey? People fear the bank. People fear talking to the bank. So I think it's a good lesson for everyone listening. Speak to your banker and see what your options are. Figure it out from there.
So I think also with residuals or balloons, if you're a very disciplined individual and you're going to commit to reducing capital, if you know you're going to get a bonus or whatever the case may be, you can structure your payments. People use balloons or residual values to improve cash flow over a period of time. But for me, the discipline piece is absolutely critical.
But something that you raised, I think it's very interesting. The decision to take a residual or not is dependent on the type of car. Certain cars are known to have a high resale value. If you've got a 10 or 15% residual on a Toyota Fortuner, a Toyota Hilux, a Ford Ranger, excellent car that's got a lovely resale value, no problem at the end of the day. You refinance it, your car's still worth way more than what you owe. Use a Renault Clio as an example. You don't want to be refinancing 30% of the original value on a Renault Clio when your car's worth 25% of the original value. So just an example there. And I think that's a very, very valid point. What type of car?
Consider that first.
What I like always when a customer or a client or a viewer asks a question, we give them more answers than they actually need. I think Rajan's going to write to us. You give me 4 answers now. Help me choose.
No, it's good because we're helping more than just Rajan, right?
Correct.
Need advice? Visit changecars.co.za and click on the Keep It or Change Cars tab. So our next question comes from Kolani in Baklu. So Kolani says he's aware of 2 people that have run into financial difficulty and are now 2 months in arrears on their car finance, right? He's indicated that both cases, a deposit in excess of 100,000 Rand has been put down, and the amount owing in total is way less than what the car is worth. What would we advise them to do? Michael, what's your take?
Honestly, sell as quick as possible. Have no issues. You go to any motor dealer. We're just using thumbsuck figures here. The car's worth 300,000 Rand. You owe 240,000. You've clearly got financial problems. Take the 60,000 Rand that you've got. Don't have a bad credit record with the bank. Settle the bank. They won't come calling. You don't have that angst. What happens is 3, 4, 5 months, that extra value that's been built up very quickly gets eroded because the bank keeps debiting you, whether you pay or you don't pay. If your installment is 6,000 Rand, you don't pay it, at 6,000 plus interest. Then the legal fees, and rightly so, banks have to engage legal if they're not getting their money. My advice, and I don't know if you agree with me, the moment you run into a financial situation, get shot of that car as quick as possible. Keep your credit record. You will get back on your feet, please God. But don't take the right advice. It's going to get worse. Your car's going to be worth less than what you owe, and then you've got a no-win situation. I don't think Deen needs to answer that. I've answered that perfectly, guys.
No, but perhaps I have a different angle to this. So, I mean, definitely good advice, Michael. I mean, the customers in question should have actually approached their bank way in advance. They're already 2 months in arrears. Interest is accrued. They've missed 2 payments. They're actually losing out on that deposit that they put in. Right? But the awesome thing is they have this opportunity because the debt is actually much lower than the car is worth. Right?
The outstanding, correct. His outstanding balance is way less than what the car is worth. That's why I said the car's an asset. It's not a liability. A car's one of two. It's either an asset or a liability. You owe 200 and your car's worth 100,000. It's a liability. Other way around, your car's worth 200,000. You owe 100,000. You've got an asset. He's got an asset. And this is a very, very valid question because I can tell you now, Gugu, lots of people are in this situation daily. They leave it too long. Some miracle's going to happen. Miracles don't happen. Only decisive action solves problems.
So as quickly as possible, before you're in trouble, you would say?
Yeah, before you're in trouble, get in touch with your bank. But also understand, I mean, depends on the use of that vehicle, right? I mean, we don't have the detail on the clients concerned, but are they using it for work? Do they need it to travel and earn money, right? Is there a good public transport system if they get rid of that car? So the bank will offer options. And I mean, you could go to a motor dealer, you could trade it in, you could settle your debt and have cash in your pocket, which is always good. And then rethink your finances and decide whether you're going to refinance or use public transport, as I said.
But I think the recurring theme here, when we're talking about banks are approachable. Banks want to help. It's in your interest to help the customer. It's not in your interest to have cars building up in your repo yard. No bank wants that in their repo yard. So speak to the bank.
Speak to the bank. I think
there is a solution.
Yeah. We'll learn something new every day. I learned something new today. I didn't know any of this. Change Cars proudly endorses Absa Vehicle Finance for your dream car. The next one is from Anastasia. She's a young lady who's just qualified as a lawyer and is earning a very decent salary, she says. Now, her question is, how will the bank view her application for car finance as she's a first-time car buyer and she's only 26? Negative or positive as a bank for someone like her?
So I think what's in her favor, she's a professional, right? Though she may have a very thin credit bureau record.
Likely.
And very, very likely. We don't know the detail once again. But I mean, as a bank, we look at two things when we actually score credit for vehicle and asset finance. We look at the asset that the customer is purchasing and we look at their credit bureau history, their payment records. I would assume that in this case, the credit bureau record is fairly thin, right? But what counts in her favor is the fact that she's a professional. And lots of banks, in fact, all of them in South Africa, have options for professionals. Because we know there's sustainability of income, it would be easy for the client to either start her own business or walk into a job as a professional. So the ability to earn income is always there. And banks look at those things. So, I mean, without having a lot of detail, I would say that her chances of financing are pretty good. But it all depends on how we score that application.
In terms of age, now it's interesting. I must say, I don't think of 26 as young. When I think of, and again, I'm not being condescending, 26, clearly been at varsity for many years. Well done to her for qualifying. 19, 20, 21, I consider a youngster. 26, is that young for a bank?
No, it's not young. So, I mean...
I was 26 a few years ago.
Yeah, well, I think we all were. So if you think about it, a 3-year degree, you get out of university, you're probably 21, you're a first jobber. We definitely do finance those clients, right? So there's definitely an opportunity to finance a vehicle. We also do understand that people need to be mobile. Right. And being a lawyer, you probably have to travel from place to place. So, and I mean, we in the business of financing, we look for opportunities to make people mobile.
Now, something interesting, just a question for me. So I've been in the motor trade. This is my 32nd year. I know in the old days when we used to deal with Absa, it used to be called Bankfin. Is it still a big advantage for a client to approach the bank they bank with? As Absa Vehicle Finance, do you look differently at a customer who banks with you? Would it be advantageous?
Most definitely. So if you bank with Absa, for example, and you have a transactional account, you may have a savings or investment account, will definitely count in your favor.
And is that because it's you garner a history on the client,
Yes.
or just because you feel the client's loyal to you, or combination of?
So we have more history, definitely. So if a client doesn't bank with me, I may not know how, unless it's on the bureau, I may not know how a credit card is conducted,
Sure.
a home loan. We generally also don't see information on transactional accounts, right?
Okay.
And I mean, you could have, unless we look at the statements from the competitor bank, we may not have a view of whether there's dishonest on record or
Sure.
excesses, etc., etc. So there is an advantage, especially if you are a professional and you have a relationship with a bank who offers a young professional offering. They do look at you favorably because there's value propositions built for these type of clients.
But I think what is key here for Anastasia and all people listening is there are so many little nuances that you can control. Good credit record at all times. I always tell people your credit record is like your face. It will come back to reward you or to punish you. And what I mean by that is look after your body, look after your health. It's important. Your credit record, fair to say, from a bank's perspective, is key.
Michael, I couldn't have actually summed it up any better than what you've said, right? It's so important in terms of getting access to credit, to keep your credit bureau, your payment profile clean.
Absolutely.
And I think people generally, they make the mistake of not managing it well. And that's why I'm going to have to go back again, talk to your financial institution, ask for advice, make payment
100%.
arrangements. We're here to help. I mean, we don't want to see clients go down the wrong road.
Sure. Client foresees that he's going to go into arrears. His payment is 4,000 Rand. Instead of missing 4,000 Rand, have the debit order returned. Approach the bank, say, for the next 4 months, I'm going to have a challenge. I can pay 2,000. That is far better than saying, okay, well, the bank's not going to hassle me for 2 or 3 months. And that's what you're saying. Talk to the bank. There is a solution. A bank is like a parent. They will guide you. I mean it. I really do believe that. They'll guide you on what's needed.
Look, I appreciate Absa as well personally. Car finance, personally, Absa was the bank to help. The bond as well. Of all the banks, Absa was the bank to say, hey, we'll help you, lad. So, perfect. Want SA's leading insurance? Visit changecars.co.za and click on the Discovery logo. The next one is from Jürgen. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Jürgen.
This one is more for you, Deen, our financial expert from Absa. So Jürgen is from Germany and he's called South Africa home for many years, since 1994. Now, he has his eye on a stunning 1996 Ferrari 355, but it's going for an eye-watering 2.7 million Rand. It's a lot of money. Yeah. So the car itself has 37,000 kilometers on it and is in good condition. It's as good as the day it left the factory. And he indicates that he can put down a deposit of 1 million Rand. The question is for you, Deen. Will the bank finance a classic car that old?
Yeah, wow, beautiful car.
With that kind of deposit, of course.
Yeah, so
And we rather focus on just the car.
stunning car. I'm still trying to get that out of my head.
100%.
No, so classic,
Beautiful.
beautiful car, classic.
Yeah.
Once again, I mean, this type of client, if he has a good relationship with his bank, it does make a difference. If he's got a long history, because it's an old car. It's a classic. You're not going to readily find values on these cars, right?
Yeah.
There's a limited market.
Correct.
It's pure supply and demand. If for hypothetically, if we're to repossess it, in a worst case scenario, would there be a demand in the market to pay what he financed it for? But he's got a deposit, which really, really does help, right? So you're creating equity in that vehicle.
Correct.
So it would all depend. We definitely do look at financing classics. It depends on the car itself. It depends on the client. It depends on their credit profile, their ability to generate income in the future.
Okay.
Because as I said earlier, if we have to repo, I'm not going to be able to get rid of that car fairly easily. There's not a huge market that buys that type of asset.
So I'm going to wear two hats here. I'm going to be Jürgen to start. Jürgen, if you can't get finance, sell your house and buy the car cash. Okay. Rent is a wonderful thing, but on a serious note,
Yeah.
certain cars are constantly going up in value. A Ferrari is genuinely dictated, the value of that car, by the rand-dollar exchange rate. It's just getting more and more valuable. There's always less in the world. Every year, the odd one gets stolen, gets written off. So that kind of car, from a financial institution point of view, or a customer, remember, when you're financing a car for 5 years, it's got to be at that level, in my opinion, an appreciating asset. You go buy a 25-year-old Mercedes. That is not a classic just yet. It's not the same thing. That car is not appreciating in value. I'm saying to the listeners, don't think about financing that car. You're going to finance something, a nice Porsche 911, a Ferrari, a Lamborghini, certain Maseratis. It's got to be the right car. But it's just interesting to know that the bank will consider it. And what you're saying there is it's more client dependent than vehicle dependent.
And perhaps if I could elaborate, Michael, because we, as I alluded to earlier, we score the article, the asset, and the customer. With this type of car, there's no information on TransUnion or Lightstone.
So it's case by case.
It's on a
essentially.
case-by-case basis. We'll have to go and assess what these assets sell for in the market, understand whether we have the appetite to take on the risk, look at the client. But in this case, as you said, Michael, we're going to look towards the customer more so than the vehicle.
But not just as a layman, just purely a question. When you say, will a car like that be evaluated physically? Will you have somebody at the bank that will go, or would you ask a reputable dealer to evaluate it for you?
Yeah, so we would generally not do it ourselves.
Yeah.
I mean, we're a high volume, low margin business, and we don't have the resources to go out and do valuations. So we'll test the market. We'll probably go to a Ferrari dealer or an exotics dealer and say, what is your view on this vehicle? What would you sell it for? Is there a demand in the market? We'll get a sense of what the market will pay for that vehicle in a worst case scenario.
What is incredible is what is happening in the classic car market. The amount of vehicles that are leaving South Africa. I mean, obviously, left-hand drive, go to Europe. Right-hand drive, go to New Zealand, Australia. But there's one thing. Value going up. Jürgen, I can't repeat enough. Just buy that car and send us a photo.
Sell the house and buy the car.
Buy the
financing. Now, Deen, for me, it's interesting to hear what you've said about that, because I think there's this perception that banks don't finance cars older than 10 years old. And I think people are learning something new. I had an idea that you guys do finance cars slightly older, but I didn't know the terms, conditions, and what you guys look at. So what I'm understanding is you can go as far back as you want. It doesn't have to be 10, 12, or the cap is not at 15 years. It's just on a case by case.
So generally, your high volume vehicles in the market, we would finance most of them probably up to 10 to 15 years. Depending on the make and model again, right?
A vehicle like a Toyota Hilux, Toyota Fortuner, where the value is totally not in line with the book value. Book value is X, that car's worth triple X. You happy to finance it 8, 10, 12 years old?
Yes, definitely. I mean, we do go to those terms in terms of the age of the vehicle. But obviously, we look at the risk, as we said earlier.
Of course.
What's that vehicle potentially going to be worth once the finance term is up? What can you sell it for? So it's all risk dependent, really. And I think, if you look at the market over the last 24 months post-COVID, there was a huge demand for used because there was no new stock in the market. It drove prices up.
The prices were stratospheric.
They were stratospheric, and dealers were selling older models. Clients were keen to buy older models.
Yes.
Some of these older models had low mileage because they weren't being driven around. You couldn't go anywhere during COVID. People didn't commute to work. So there was a demand, and people were willing to pay more for these assets. But I think subsequent to that, we've seen a shift in the market.
Things are changing.
There's a change. Those prices have corrected. there are a number of clients who are overpaid for those vehicles. So you need to be careful. I mean, especially from a bank's perspective, you need to be prudent because if that client wants to get out of that car now in 2023, it's going to be difficult for the price they paid.
Correct. But now what's interesting, I said to you, I'm always looking to learn. For our listeners, those tuning in, if you're looking to finance an old car, my advice to you, the key, not the age of the car, is the mileage. An 8-year-old car with 220,000 kilos, don't even consider it. Walk away. An 8-year-old car with 60, 70, 80,000 Ks, and they are around, you can finance that car with your eyes closed because that car's got the equivalent of a 3 or 4-year-old car. It's mileage. The fact that it's 8 years old, age doesn't kill a car. Only mileage hurts a car.
So does a deposit make a difference, Dean? If a person's putting down a deposit, a substantial one, do their chances of getting finance for an older car increase?
Most definitely. So we
Cash is king.
Cash
Is king.
We obviously work on retail and trade values, and you'll find that some of these cars, from an equity perspective, the loan to value that we finance is much higher than the actual retail value of that asset. So if a client has cash and he finds that low mileage asset that's in absolutely good condition, makes sense to buy it. We may not necessarily finance the full value. So you have a deposit. You can get an awesome car that's going to last you for a very long time, that's in good condition. I would assume that it's been well maintained, it's been serviced. That's probably going to be a good buy.
But what's interesting, Gugu, anytime, and again, this is my view and my experience, when a customer puts down a deposit, it just shows he's got interest in that car.
He's got skin in the game.
He's got skin in the game. If I've got 30% deposit in that vehicle, trust me, I'm going to pay it off. If I've got nothing to lose, I'm not generalizing, but some people say, you know what, the bank takes my car away, I will deal with it. A deposit, I personally believe, and again, I don't think all the banks will agree with me, a deposit should be mandatory. A 75% deposit, nothing 75. Major.
It's definitely good advice, Michael. I mean, it's generally a depreciating asset, right? And if you put skin in the game, you put a deposit down, and if you run into financial difficulty, like our earlier caller, you have options.
Correct.
You have options.
Correct. Awesome.
You learn something new every day at the Keep It Or Change Cars podcast. Looking to buy a new or used car? Visit changecars.co.za. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Dean, wisdom for days. Michael, walking encyclopedia. I always call you that. Thank you guys for your time. And if you have any questions, queries, car-related, insurance, whatever it is, email us at podcast@changecars.co.za and our guests will answer anything.